Thank you very much, everybody, for having me here. I would like to focus my remarks on a hearing that I had with 10 human rights defenders from different organisations who are still working in Gaza. I had the hearing about 10 days ago. I'd like to focus on what they bring their voices, in fact, on what they said about daily life, about the risks that they're facing, about the funding situation and what they are calling for. So first on the daily life. They're like everybody else. They're in the same catastrophic situation. They have no homes and they have no offices. And they've always worked. Even when I was in Gaza, you could see they worked under tremendous pressure. But the situation has worsened incredibly. And they've been displaced, as we all know, by the IDF over and over again. One woman said she had already moved 5 times, starting with her children every time again. And another woman, human rights defender, said she had been displaced 7 times. And she said, and I quote her, "I myself have been displaced 7 times. Each time I was forced to begin from scratch. My home was demolished. I lacked the basic needs for living. I borrowed all the clothes on my back from my sisters and others, and these are all I have." And they are living in tents and working in tents. And their day, they say, begins by the search for food and water for themselves and for their families. But there's no guarantee that they will find anything. And one of the women human rights defenders on the call, on the online meeting, said that she had had no water that day because there was no water and it was already midday in Gaza. Another woman said, you know, she sets off in the morning and she's so afraid that anything could happen when she's looking for supplies and she won't come back because they have no protection. And she could be killed. And she says, you know, I see my child and my child should be going to school. My child should be playing football. Instead, he's hanging around dead bodies. They are very near the killing of, as Irene was talking about, the killing of journalists, and I regard journalists and medical doctors and health workers as human rights defenders in Gaza. One of them was in the tent where Anas al-Sharif, the journalist, was killed by Israel on the morning of his killing. And their work is tiring and cumbersome and very risky. In order for a lawyer or a researcher to get from point to B, they have to find a donkey if they're lucky, or else walk for hours with Israeli planes and drones overhead, they said. And they are all doing their work hungry or starving. Like everyone else, you can't get food because it isn't there. Instead, there is hunger and malnutrition, and the effects are mental as well as physical. One woman defender told me she no longer recognizes herself in the mirror. She has lost so much weight. And another man defender told me, the words we have are no longer, and I'm quoting him, sufficient to describe the situation. Once people have lived through hunger and starvation, after you, your children and your wife have lived through them, they have a real taste after you have struggled to secure even the basic needs for your loved ones. So moving on to the risks that they are facing on the ground, and as we know, these are extreme. Many have been killed by Israel already, and that is the risk that they face every day. That is what the defenders are talking about when they say they fear to make it home after their day's work. This is targeted killing and random killing, and Israel has absolutely no regard for civilians if they are Palestinian. Mr. Ihab Marwan Kamal Faisal, Ms. Noor Nasser, Abdul Al-Noor and Ms. Dana Yagli, all human rights defenders with the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, were killed by Israel in separate airstrikes in February 24 and January 25. And these are just 3 examples. Mr. Faisal was killed with his wife and 2 daughters, aged 6 and 3. Miss Abu Al-Noor was killed along with her little 2-year-old daughter, her parents and 4 siblings. And Miss Yagi was killed along with 37 members of her family. These are horrors, and yet the United States, Germany, the UK, and so many other states keep supporting what Israel is doing. And when I spoke with these human rights defenders in Gaza, one of them made it very clear. We are all on death row in Gaza now, they said. They've absolutely no protection. On the funding situation, of course there's not enough funding. Human rights defenders are barely meeting their basic needs, if they are being met at all. The sanctions imposed by the US on Palestinian organisations, which are completely baseless, and a clear attempt to stop the defenders doing their work, has made the situation all the more difficult. Al-Mizan, Al-Haq, the Palestinian Centre for Human Rights, Adamir, these groups have been doing essential work for decades. They are being targeted, as they have been for years, because they are building a path to accountability for the crimes Israel has committed against Palestinians. Israel and the United States want to close down the path to justice, and this is why these organisations are being targeted. It's because they are keeping the hope alive that one day justice will be achieved. And all states who claim to uphold human rights must push back against what is being done with them. And there must be more funding, increased funding for defenders on the ground. With more support, they could do more, collect more evidence of what has happened, better document the crimes, and they would contribute to upholding international law, which all states say they support. And finally, just to say what they all, because I asked each defender on that call, was asked the same questions by me, and one of the questions was what they are calling